The counterexample always is, I mean, there's plenty of right-wing forces in the country that also want to ban homosexuality or trans people in general, right?
No,
like there's
no one wants to ban trans people in Britain. No.
Okay, well, that's not what I have seen so far, but maybe I'm wrong on this.
What do you mean?
But I mean, there's a lot of, I think our bosses, our capital owners in America are like, why would I get an American worker who is in comparison to an Indian worker that's coming into the country that is desperate to keep this job? Why would I hire the American worker? I can pay the same fee to the Indian worker, or even a higher fee, as a matter of fact, to the Indian worker, because I know that he is going to work harder than the American labor force. So there is this competition.
God, he's so fucking retarded. What you just said, like, justifies their hiring, right? You know, like, I could pay somebody this, or I could pay this guy this, who will work harder for the same wage or whatever. Well, shouldn't they hire that person then? Is that not?
My girlfriend at the time was like a model trying to become an actress. She was like, one of us has to actually work. And she was like, you should keep doing the advertising stuff to make money so that I can be, a model and actress, whatever. And I was like, okay. And
oh my God, graduated college, no job prospects, was working hard to put him and his girlfriend through their careers while wow, this is just, what a selfless individual. My God. Hasan, he took my advice and he's branching out. He's doing adversarial interviews. Will this be adversarial, or will they just agree on all the populist stuff?
Hasan Piker, welcome to Triggernometry.
Nice to be here, guys.
Why the big sigh?
Italy's Mussolini and Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany were ruthless fascist forms of governance. My fear is that is where capitalism inevitably leads. There's too much instability, there's too much chaos. We need to restore order.
Is there a country that's done socialism the way that you like?
I would say China is probably the closest, I would say, to an example that we should follow.
Like communism in America?
I think that communism would be most likely an international thing. It'd be like the Star Trek universe.
You think the Reform Party is
I think the Reform Party, as it stands currently, is a nascent fascist parliamentary group that hasn't reached its full potential yet.
Hasan Piker, welcome to Triggernometry.
Nice to be here, guys.
Why the big sigh?
We'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
I'm getting cooked right now, for those of you at home watching, and this has got to be extra weird for you guys because you're British, and this is what the sun looks like normally.
Yeah, no, it's nice to know. We're enjoying it. I'm sorry about the sun. This is not deliberate. We're not trying to cook you, literally. But welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about you. Like, you obviously got a massive Twitch channel. You're very successful streaming. Twitch is a gaming platform, but you talk on there, and that's what people follow you for. How did you get there? What's been your journey through life?
I started my professional media career, I guess, as a nepotism recipient at my uncle's 26-person YouTube startup media network. I feel like calling it a media network is interesting because, like, at that point, it was smaller than like a mid-tier podcast. Yeah.
26 people is a mid-tier podcast? Does Joe Rogan even have 26 employees? Also, wasn't the Young Turks the largest left-leaning YouTube channel, like, of all the left, like, back in like 2010? Does anybody know the timeline on that? I could be wrong on that. But I
started there because I just wanted to not live in New Jersey. I wanted to live in LA. And that's where the Young Turks headquarters were. And I, much like virtually all of my peers, came out of college with a double major, great marks, and no job prospects whatsoever. So I was like, all right, I'll just start off my journey here.
Whose mom does commercial real estate, whose dad was a C-level exec, right? Or a very high exec in all these companies, whose parents traveled the world, who sent him to had no job prospects. Okay. We can survive his background, okay? We can survive this. We can make it through this. Oh, God.
And it'll allow me to be in LA, where I want to be, right? And slowly but surely, I worked my way through the ranks there, offering a lot of free work, just as a fill-in producer or fill-in guest host whenever, someone didn't show up, they were sick or something, while I was actually doing the advertisement stuff on the back end. I was basically the singular advertisement operations person. Not only was I creating client lists, but doing cold calls, trying to get DR campaigns going for the Young Turks and like fill the inventory of the Young Turks with some brand names that I think everyone is now familiar with, like Squarespace and things of that nature. That was a big client of mine initially, but I hated it. And I thought, I think I could do better if I were on an on-camera position. And so, but the problem was I was horrible on camera at first. And I just kept going through it. My girlfriend at the time was like a model trying to become an actress. She was like, one of us has to actually work. And she was like, you should keep doing the advertising stuff to make money so that I can be, a model and actress, whatever. And I was like, okay. And even a bunch of my friends were like, maybe you should stop doing this on-camera stuff. You're not very good at it. And I was like, no, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep doing it because eventually I'll get better at it. And I guess over the years, I did get somewhat better at it. But while I was at the Young Turks, I was
oh my God, graduated college, no job prospects, was working hard to put him and his girlfriend through their careers while wow, this is just, what a selfless individual. My God.
Doing all this stuff, I set up the show called The Breakdown. It was very successful because it aligned perfectly with the Facebook algorithm turning on the faucet for video content. This was when everyone was doing the pivot to video, BuzzFeed and all these other places. There's a company called Upworthy. I don't know if you guys recall. Way back in the day, they were getting like tens of millions of views a week, and my videos were getting like 30 million views a week. I was contesting Tommy Lauren's right-wing commentary at the time, and that was when I first made a name for myself, I guess, as a leftist political commentator. But I wanted something more. I wanted something that I could call my own. I wanted a sense of community for myself. I didn't want to be under the umbrella of the Young Turks as much as I was. So I thought to myself, I play video games already when I'm not working. Might as well go to this platform called Twitch. It was a video gaming platform at the time, even though there was some commentary happening there as well. And I decided I'm just going to strap on a PlayStation camera onto my PlayStation 4 at the time and start live broadcasting and while I play Fortnite. And I have a bunch of other friends who are journalists, activists, organizers, and whatnot that I play Fortnite with anyway. So we'll just talk about political issues while I do this. Now, there's a couple different reasons why I did that. Like I said, one, because I wanted to have something of my own, a media property of my own. The other reason was because I recognized that the gaming side of things, like the gaming culture side of that space, was heavily dominated by right-wing commentary, whereas gamers were much more diverse in their opinion, myself included. And I wanted to present an alternative. I also wanted to go against the grain, because at the time, we're talking like 2016, 2017, at the peak of like woke SJW cartoonish depictions of what the left represented. And there was some validity to the arguments that were being presented. Obviously, it was like the most maximalist, most ridiculous depiction of the left. But some people would lean into that a little bit, where they were like, no, we are like this. We are joy killers. We are woke skulls. And I was like, I don't think you have to be that. I think you can have fun and also still have progressive values. And I wanted to basically show that to a audience that had maybe never really encountered that. And I wanted to be in an environment that I was comfortable in as a male who games. And that was a very male-focused gamer space, which was. And last but not least, I wanted to get better off the cuff, because up until that moment, I had always scripted my content. I was writing it, and then I would actually take the writing on my videos and turn it into a Huffington Post article. So I would just like reformat my scripts into an actual article, and that was fine. But I wasn't very good off the cuff.
Yeah, do you ever think there'd be a point in his life where it's like, yeah, so I started with this game called StarCraft 2, and I played the Zog race, and I was
I thought to myself, I can play video game and talk about politics at the same time and be able to entertain people, maybe 30 at a time, maybe 300 at a time if I'm lucky.
That'd be crazy, yeah. Politics and video gaming at the same time. You recognize the whole community is like pretty right-leaning, and man, wow, you could combine gaming and wow, that's, yeah, true.
Then I can get a lot better at public speaking and speaking off the cuff. And as you guys might have figured out by now, I never shut the fuck up. So I guess it worked.
And you mentioned progressive values and that being something that's important to you. What are progressive values, would you say?
I think progressive values, for me at least, are founded around empathy first and foremost, to try and uplift everyone's material conditions to the best of our ability, and focusing on protecting those who need protection, and simultaneously advancing the cause of the way I think about it, advancing the cause of unlocking the potential of every single person, no matter where they are. Because right now, there are probably billions of brilliant people that never actually get the opportunity to unlock their true potential because of where they're born. Like, they might be born in Sudan, in a village that is being overtaken by the RSF. They might be born in India to an impoverished neighborhood and are not going to have the access to education and therefore be able to truly revolutionize whatever sector they might be interested in revolutionizing. And I think that's what I want to do.
And what do you think is the way to, because I think that's probably something the left and right actually agree on in my experience, the center left, the center right, they're kind of moderate. But I suppose the disagreement probably is about what you think is the way by which that happens. So the right might say, well, the answer to that is capitalism, right? I imagine you don't agree. So how do you think?
Sorry, I was having a call with your mom real quick. Are these guys going to find a way to, like, they're going to agree the whole time, aren't they? Because they're both on their weird kind of like populist bend, and they're just going to spend the majority of their time shitting on maybe the center right or the right and the center left, and then they're going to agree on everything.
It's capitalism, right? I imagine you don't agree. So how do you think those things get? Those people who don't currently have opportunity, both in this country, in other Western countries, but around the world, what's the mechanism by which they get those opportunities?
I think creating a robust base of support, like a minimum social safety net for all, is the way to do it. And there are many different ways of achieving that result. I don't think capitalism has been able to do that. What I mean by that is capitalism still revolves around the inherent contradiction of at its most reductive way to put it, someone's got to clean the toilet. And in an effort to make sure that there is always going to be people that are wage laborers, there is this dynamic where we can't advance humanity too much. This plays itself out on the international scale in unequal exchange, where if we were to allow a lot of the third world to develop to a certain degree, then things would be far too costly. We wouldn't get the cheap materials and the cheap natural resources.
Isn't the third world developing much quicker than the first world actually did, right? Like the cell phone proliferation across Africa, like clean water and utilities are expanding faster, like child mortality and all that is decreasing faster. Like they're benefiting from a lot of the gains of the first world. But that's okay. We can do this resource exploitation narrative, I guess, as well. Sure.
Resources that we need to extract so that we can have an iPhone for the reasonable price of $500, or I mean, even that's increasing now. I personally think that if we were to do that, by stopping our endless and needless and cruel militarism in the global South and allow these places to develop, extend an open hand to them, that we would allow society to flourish in ways that we previously have not foreseen.
I guess your point about cleaning toilets is interesting, because something we've addressed a lot on this trip with guests right, left, center, etc., is the incredible wealth inequality and the speed at which the gap is, that's growing. It's a big problem. People on the right don't want to admit it, and it's true. But
he was trying to find the capital labor contradiction and just forgot the script and said, clean the toilets, Destiny Education. Yeah. What is the natural contradiction in capital labor? When you say contradiction, are you implying that, is it about the wage exploitation that the owner engages in with the worker? That's the antagonism, right? Yeah. I'm sure you could phrase that in some Marxist friendly way. But I feel like the incorporation of that into modern society, the contradiction or the issue is just that capital can just grow so much faster that a toilet cleaner will only ever really be able to clean so many toilets at a particular time. And so his lifetime earnings are always going to be capped. Whereas the guy who owns the company that employs toilet cleaners can employ 50 million toilet cleaners and enjoy the profits of all those people that all those people generate. Yeah, but whatever. I don't know. Also toilet cleaners, I guess, whatever Hasan said.
On the other hand, someone is always going to have to clean the toilets, right? Like, we have a pretty big safety net in the UK. And what that's mainly done is trapped a lot of people in a place where they don't have to work, and they therefore don't. And also, you talk about, important people from other countries to work for less. Kind of the consequence of that is it suppresses wages for the people in the country as well. So who would clean the toilets if we...
So, great question. Let me address the wage depression aspect of this, because this is the one area
that we agree on, because wage depression is caused by capital owners.
Where sometimes I hear Tucker Carlson talk about it, and there's like some nuggets of truth in there. Because yes, importing labor into the country will always depress wages in the absence of good regulation. And good regulation in that format would be demanding wage parity, and also not creating any other external factors that actually cause you to have a more servile labor force. What I mean by this is, I want to use the example of H-1B visas. The reason why H-1B visa system exists on paper is because there are certain highly skilled positions that, as it stands, our American companies are unable to fulfill. They're not able to fill those roles with.
But the reality is they just don't want to fill them at a certain dollar amount, and they know they can take cheap labor from India and bring them into these jobs to fuck over the average American worker. Greedy corporations.
Domestic labor force, right? That's on paper. In practice, of course, it creates a more pliable labor force that you're bringing in, oftentimes from highly skilled countries that are still desperate, even if there is higher wages on average on the H-1B visa program, because if you lose your job, you get deported. Nobody wants to get deported, so they will do everything in their power to stay and work as hard as they physically possibly can. So this creates an environment where I think our bosses, our capital owners in America, are like, why would I get an American worker who is, in comparison to an Indian worker that's coming into the country that is desperate to keep this job? Why would I hire the American worker? I can pay the same fee to the Indian worker, or even a higher fee, as a matter of fact, to the Indian worker, because I know that he is going to work harder than the American labor force. So there is this competition. The way to solve that competition is...
That's not even the best... This isn't even like the best... God, he's so fucking retarded. That's okay, though. He's venturing out. This is good. I support you, Hasan. You're good for trying to do this. But like, what you just said justifies their hiring, right? You know, like, I could pay somebody this, or I could pay this guy this, who will work harder for the same wage or whatever. Well, shouldn't they hire that person then? Is that not, unless you want to just get strictly into like this kind of like native protectionist idea that like, well, fuck that. I don't care about who works better. What the most efficient thing is, I just want to protect my own country's workers, which I guess.
Through regulation. If the workers that were coming in from poorer countries were coming in with the knowledge that they are not going to be immediately deported, for example, and they have wage parity with the domestic labor force, this would actually make American companies think twice before hiring someone just as a replacement for the American worker, because they wouldn't get any additional benefits as a boss. They wouldn't get the additional benefit of like, I'm going to work you to the bone, right? Because I know if I fire you, you're gone. You're gone out of the country and you want to be here. So that is a regulatory mechanism that we never implement in this country, because our capital owners actually enjoy the two-tiered labor structure that we have here.
And come back to the who cleans the toilets, even when there's a social welfare system.
I think that ultimately there's going to be people that fulfill these roles no matter what. And increasingly with automation and with AI, we're getting to a point where the route tasks are already being delegated to robots to begin with. So the way I see ultimately there's going to be people structure that we have here.
And come back to the who cleans the toilets, even when there's a social welfare system.
I think that ultimately there's going to be people that fulfill these roles no matter what. And increasingly with automation and with AI, we're getting to a point where the route tasks are already being delegated to robots to begin with.
I love how socialists always just like assume away the hard parts of their problems, right? Like, well, what are you going to do about like kind of like menial labor or people who might not necessarily be the more productive members of society or whatever, or who's going to do these? Well, AI and tech will solve that thing. And it's like, okay.
So the way I see it is there's always going to be someone that is tasked with this, tasked with either overseeing it, if it's a robot doing it, or directly doing it. But since it's an important factor in the commodity production, because someone has to engage in sanitation, I think it's much more valuable to ensure that they have a sense of autonomy and that those positions are hired and have enough replacement labor force so that they do less hours in general and still get a decent amount of pay, and so that they can still feel human and have some sense of autonomy in the labor force where they can do that job and still make an honest living and be able to feed their family and also have some free time on the side to pursue whatever hobbies they want to pursue.
So the way to achieve that would be like what, a really high minimum wage, or like what's the way to get there? Like, 'cause I agree with the idea that people who are working every kind of job.
A question I don't know the answer to is how much do we incentivize immigrants learning English? Do we like give them free schooling, or do we not care because their kids will learn English after or either naturally? I personally, that's one of the few pro-Nazi talking points that I actually agree with. I don't know if we should go as far as to have like a national language, but I do think that like encouraging heavily or getting people, like everybody should speak the same language in a country. I think that's pretty important. I think so far it seems like that's not much of a problem in the United States, but like if it ever became a problem, then obviously we should do something to alleviate that. Yeah, but I think it's important that everybody should be able to communicate with each other.
Should have free time and make a good living. The question is, how do you do that? Because in a market economy, what you are paid is a function of what you produce, right?
Yeah. Well, I think in a market economy, what you are paid should be what you produce. I don't think that that's how it works in the market.
Oh my God, he's so dumb and boring. It's still going to be a function of what you produce. Yes, you have a boss that takes away part of your profit or part of the surplus value of your labor, but that doesn't mean that you're still not paid, based upon your production, right? Like, yeah, your boss is stealing money from you if you're a software dev or if you're a McDonald's worker, but you're making a lot more money as a software dev than a McDonald's worker.
The economy. I think in the market economy, your replaceability is what determines your wages, especially if you are replaceable by a non-domestic labor force, for example. That depresses your wages even further on the domestic front for the citizen labor force. So I think you're right, though. In the market economy, your output should be the determining factor. That's actually a socialist position, ironically enough. Not all socialists are against the market, and I would say that the output is the most consequential factor in that regard. I agree.
How do you square away that from each according to his whatever to each according to his needs? What is it? From each according to his abilities to each according to his needs? How do you square those two statements away? It's just a quote, okay?
What that means, however, is that if the company is actually, for example, increasing its output and therefore generating more revenue overall, then everyone down to the most replaceable aspect of labor, which would be sanitation in this regard, should still get paid a just wage, like fair compensation. Minimum wages is one way of doing it as a Band-Aid solution. But there are Nordic countries, for example, where there is no minimum wage, because the minimum wage would ironically be a depressing factor on the overall average wages that people get. How have they achieved this, though? They've achieved this through sectoral bargaining. They've achieved this through robust unions and labor participation in these wage negotiations. And that is the reason why they don't need to have a minimum wage. The minimum wage in and of itself is a big point of contention in the United States of America and a lot of other Western countries, only because our labor union participation in the United States is at less than 10% right now, which is unimaginably low. It's lower than countries that we have dominated, like Chile, where we rewrote their constitution basically and wanted to unleash a wave of neoliberalism, sometimes in the hands of a dictator like Pinochet. Even in that country, there's still 15% labor union participation. So it's still higher than the United States of America, which is crazy to me.
Hasan, I've got a lot of empathy for some of your positions, particularly when you talk about low-skilled labor. So for context, my mother is a Venezuelan immigrant to the UK. When she was in the UK, she was a childminder. There was no minimum wage. My mum, roughly, I remember earning £2.20 an hour. There were no pension rights. So thankfully, I help my parents out. My dad helps my mum out, so she's not destitute. But that's what my mum's position would be if she didn't have me or my father. As somebody who is from Venezuela, I worry when people mention socialism because I've seen what's happened to my country. How would you assuage the fears of people like me or people who come from a Cuban background who've seen the socialist dream, as it were, descend into authoritarianism?
Well, first and foremost, I would say that all countries, to varying degrees, engage in authoritarianism in general. It's just something that it's a function of the government. It obviously has the capacity to get out of hand due to external factors in many instances, like combating much more powerful forces that want to cause instability in your country. It's not a justification for it, but it is analysis in terms of why these guys engage in the actions that they do in terms of suppression of all dissent or even censorship and sometimes even jail time. And the example I always use is the United States of America. not only in the Cold War, but even preceding the Cold War during World War I and World War II, actually had a practice of jailing all conscientious objectors, for example, who said, I don't want to fight in this war. They were like, all right, well, this is a world war, sucks to suck, you're going to jail. One of the famous
People I'm down on the USA. They always do. I wish somebody would say, like, well, wouldn't we want to be the country that can dominate other countries instead of the ones that get dominated by it? Like, what's so bad? What's so weak about socialist countries that they can never resist this external influence? No? Is that not a fair question?
examples is Eugene Debs, a socialist who actually ran from prison and I think achieved like 1.3 million votes at the time, which was probably the most electoral success socialists had ever achieved. He was a conscientious objector of World War I, which was the international Marxist position at the time. There was some deviation there. So I see it in a similar vein when these countries also engage in authoritarian actions, like suppressing dissent, censorship, or trying to manage this dynamic of trying to continue doing governance while at the same time they have to like make sure that they're avoiding American intervention or Western intervention in general. As far as the fears that people have, assuaging the fears that people have in terms of what they've seen in their countries, whether it be Venezuela or Cuba, I think each country is different. Each successful and unsuccessful revolution is different. And I think it's important to understand the lessons and the failures, as well as some of the areas of success that these countries have been able to implement. Avoid the failures and try to focus on the successes, and hopefully you'll be able to have a long-standing and relatively happy form of governance.
I mean, I take your point as to the conscientious objector, but you look at Venezuela, for example, and the reason I'm using it is because that's the example I know best.
Yeah.
You know, you've got rigged elections. You've got politicians who go up against Maduro. They're either thrown in jail, as in the case of Leopoldo Lopez, solitary confinement for 2 years, or you have, I think it's Corina Machado, who got nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, but she is currently in hiding in her own country because she knows the moment that her whereabouts are known, she's going to get thrown into jail, may not be seen again.
Yeah. I'm not going to defend Maduro, but I would say that the logical through line, and it's important to understand the opposition's logical through line in this instance, is that these are forces that are very directly working with the United States of America that have tried to facilitate coups, even had an unsuccessful one all the way back in 2002 with Chavez, and in numerous other instances, openly talked about implementing coups under the first Trump administration, and is openly now waging war, or at least threatening to wage war with Venezuela right now, encircling the entire coastline of Venezuela with some of the most sophisticated weaponry known to man. In that regard, I think they see it as treason. I would go so far as to say, in a similar scenario in the United States of America, I think, and this is not even a one-to-one dynamic because America is the most powerful nation on the planet, but China is getting up there, right? Let's see if China had, if in a hypothetical, if China had encircled the United States of America, and let's say in this hypothetical, I'm like very clearly someone who is going to China and talking to the CPC and saying like, we want Chinese intervention in this country because I hate Donald Trump, please. I think in that regard, America would probably treat me in the exact same way, if not in a worse way, ironically enough.
But would they throw you in jail for trying to run democratically? I don't think personally that they would.
Oh, they absolutely would, I think. You think the American government would?
Hasan is such a great example here. Didn't we literally ban communist parties in the United States? Didn't you watch Oppenheimer? Didn't they do that? The Communist Control Act of 1954. Well, that's a no. Wait, did we not make this? There's an American law signed by President Dwight Eisenhower that outlawed the Communist Party USA and criminalized membership in or support for the party or communist action organizers. Why are people in chat saying no? Am I misunderstanding this? Couldn't you point to this as an example?
Not throw me in jail if I was in a comparable scenario where China had encircled the United States of America and I was saying, I want to run democratically. I want to be, and I'm demanding that China intervene. I think they would do the same, if not worse, for sure. Because like I said, it's all a matter of the conditions on the ground. With respect to Eugene Debs, as I was talking about before, America felt threatened even at that time.
You're talking about wartime.
Yeah.
This is not a fair comparison, in my opinion, because wartime is wartime. It's about survival. Britain suspended elections during wartime, right? Like
America didn't actually. They did. They even during the Civil War.
But Britain did. America wasn't in war in the same way that Britain was.
That's why I said during the Civil War.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's fair. But again, it's different. I guess you said something interesting because, you know, I was born in the Soviet Union, so we both have direct experience of socialism in various shapes and forms. You talked about, well, there's positives and there's negatives. So is there a country that's done socialism the way that you like?
I would say that I am hypercritical of all forms of governance, including the American one. I think that's not a surprise to you guys, right? And in that same vein, I think like there is critiques to apply to all forms of governance, even socialist ones.
Yeah.
And as far as like getting closer to what I think has been relatively successful, because if ultimately the point of government is to improve the material conditions of all people to the best of your ability, it's not always going to be perfect, but when you are getting, I don't know, the poorest people, the poorest of the dispossessed masses out of a situation where they were servile to landed gentry, or they were peasants from an agrarian society, or they were dominated by the landlords, but then ultimately they were able to come into modernity and become like a powerhouse, an industrial powerhouse that is competitive with the largest superpower on the planet. I would say if that's the point of good governance, and I think you guys might agree with me on that, I would say China is probably the closest. And there are still plenty of failures within the Chinese system as well, plenty of issues within the Chinese system as well. But that's probably the closest, I would say, to an example that we should follow and lessons that we should learn from. This is something that I talk about quite a bit. Ironically enough, we only utilize some of the most repressive elements of Chinese governance here in the United States of America, especially in the second Trump administration, and none of the good stuff. We don't have any high-speed rail. We don't have any even development.
What lessons should we have learned?
There is seemingly nothing to look forward to in America in terms of economic prosperity, in terms of overall health of society, in terms of scientific achievements. And I think a lot of younger people also feel the same way, where they feel like there's nothing to look forward to here. And I'll give you guys an example from the UK. I remember seeing this TikTok of this guy that goes around and is like asking young British people, would they serve in the British military? And I am not even remotely nationalistic by any measure. I don't care about those sorts of things. But I think it's important to understand, like, it's a good way to see the temperature of society. And a lot of the young British people were like, no, why would I fight for England? Why would I fight for the UK when it seems like my government's not even fighting for me at all? And
see, the reason that a lot of them will say that, though, is it's not so much about the
Well, who are you fighting? What against who?
we're not like China in terms of building high-speed rail, although that is a big issue in the UK.
Yes.
I agree with you. The main reason is they feel like they've been let down by mass immigration that's eroding the values of their country. And of course, you know, this is where I think people on the right are very blind to this issue that we already raised, which is wealth inequality and opportunity. Right?
I'm sure there are some people who feel that way, of course, but...
well, think about this, Hasan.
but
Right? Hold on, let me just finish the point. Like, stereotypically speaking, is it left of center people or right of center people that are going to go and fight for their country? Typically, it's going to be right of center people because of the mindset that they have, right?
I think when push comes to shove, everybody fights for their country, because that's why you have to have a draft.
In a war, but what we're talking about in this situation is, will you go and serve in armed forces? That is going to be a more right-leaning perspective. And those people, we probably, fair to say, know the UK pretty well. Those people are concerned about the national identity of their country. It's like, why would I fight for a country that doesn't feel like my country is the issue for them.
This is where the big point of division comes for someone like myself. You're Venezuelan originally, like your family came from Venezuela, your family came from the USSR. You guys are the most British people I've ever encountered.
I have a very British face,
yes.
you are correct.
Yeah, exactly. You're British to the bone.
Yeah.
And yet your families also came from...
Oh no. Them both being white makes this a very weird, it's not helping his case as much as he would want it to.
countries that were somewhat far away from England, right?
Yeah.
And I'm Turkish. I grew up in Turkey. My whole family lives in Turkey still, with some exceptions. And I would say I'm pretty assimilated to American culture. I grew up being fascinated by American culture. I grew up consuming American pop culture, as do many people all around the world. And what I always find interesting is when people focus on the newcomers to say that this is actually destroying the social fabric or social cohesion, not realizing that there are a ton of polls conducted on this stuff. I can just speak for America, especially, where by the second generation, assimilation is almost complete. And by the third one, it's like virtually impossible to distinguish in terms of performance, educational output, and job performance in general. It's just like everyone becomes American.
That's not true in the UK, though, unfortunately. So if you look at, for example, Islamist radicalization, second and third generation Muslims are much more radical than first generation.
Yeah,
so we're not, that's the issue that a lot of people in Britain are concerned about, is not everyone's assimilating the way that the three of us are.
So here's the interesting point about that.
If they just had better material conditions.
First, like I said, people assimilate. It's and they become a part of the normal forces of society. They become a part of the culture, or they bring some aspect of their culture into British culture. You know, they change the cuisine, and people seemingly enjoy it, even if they also simultaneously go attend an EDL rally and then get a little quick curry afterwards, or a little kebab on the side. But beyond that, the reason why people are angry is always going to be because the trains are not running on time, because the NHS is improperly managed due to underfunding. That's what I believe. I think it's always an issue of underfunding, where they're not getting the same services that they once used to, and also things are becoming more and more costly. So in that anger, it's much easier for them to be guided by a guided by the right-wing forces to turn around and say, you're angry and you're right to be angry. And the reason why you're angry, the reason why all of these things are happening is because we are importing all of these random strangers into the country who don't speak your language, who you are scared by. And that, I think, causes division, and it causes friction that makes it harder for people to integrate. And that is part of the reason why I think, especially in a place like the UK, you see a little bit more of this resilience towards full-blown integration into society.
I also think as well, Hasan, if we're being honest, it's also because we have had such huge amounts of immigration come into the country that people understandably go, this pace of change is too much. And you have to think, let's go back to 2016, which was the Brexit referendum. Now, Brexit was about many things, but really it was about people wanting immigration to be lowered. And that was not...
Thank you for finally admitting that, you pro-Brexit fucks.
10 years ago, immigration hasn't been lowered. In fact, it's been ratcheted up. So people voted to lower immigration, and for instance, I voted Remain. People voted Brexit. I'm like, well, that's democracy. We get on. We're going to make the best of it. I do believe that when you ignore people's wishes at the ballot box and people explicitly vote for something and you ignore them for the best part of a decade, that does generate a lot of anger, and understandably so.
Yeah, I think in that same time frame, if there was enough appetite by the government to address the financial harm that people were experiencing, the economic struggles that people were experiencing, there would still be a lot of people who say, I don't want a brown person, I don't want a black person around in my neighborhood, but ultimately those numbers would be far smaller. And that's what I always go back to. I'm a leftist. I believe in economic improvements, and I believe that a lot of the reactionary forces actually take advantage of that instability, the economic volatility that exists, in an effort to shift the attention away to people who have the same exact interests as you and I do. Because ultimately,
they're the same.
I don't believe that anyone is coming into the United States of America or the UK, as a matter of fact, because they want to bring about a Salafist-style Islamic caliphate in London. I know you won't agree.
Remember, I love you Americans. Just don't compare your shit. If you're going to talk about another country's immigration, you need to be learned on that other country's immigration. Even on Canada, it's not one-to-one. You have to be very, very, very careful when you make these things. Americans have been mind-fucked by the actual putrid sludge that is currently occupying our White House and the entire Republican MAGA apparatus and movement into being mind-fucked into thinking that we had open borders and mass immigration and all these. Like, you don't even know what that looks like. You don't. I'm sorry, but like, again, if I was European and I was a racist, I would kill myself watching Americans on TV point out Mamdani and say, that's a radical Islamist right there. If I was a fucking bonger or if I was European, I would kill myself. That Americans are fucking retarded. You have just, I'm just only to say, not to validate their arguments, not to say that they're right and immigration is bad in Europe, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying that if you're going to argue something like immigration, you need to be aware of the country's concerns and their history with it. Because America just, if for no other reason, geographically, we have such a special relationship with the rest of the world, and that it's so much harder to get to our country. It's so much harder to get to our country. Like, imagine you're doing like an Olympic event, and here's my Olympians, and here's like the other people's Olympians, and imagine that their Olympians have like a set of stairs to get to the top, and my Olympians have a platform where they just have to do a singular long jump to get here. By the end of the day, all of my Olympians are going to be better than the people over here because they can just fucking walk the stairs. They just fucking walk up. Who the fuck knows there? The only people getting up here had to do some serious shit to do that. There's not poor, retarded, terrorist, evil people coming from fucking Morocco to the United States of America. They just go to Portugal or France or Spain. Why the fuck? That's just, it's an incredible journey to make. If for no other reason geographically, ignoring all the other aspects for immigration selection and everything else, just don't mind fuck yourself into thinking that it's the same. Maybe you can compare some European countries to there, but not the U.S. to other countries in Europe. It's so stupid.
To bring about a Salafist-style Islamic caliphate in London. I know you won't agree with me on this.
It's not about whether I agree. It's about whether the facts agree with you.
I don't think that's the case.
Hold on.
I think
Well, let me just give you some facts then. If we have a terrorist attack on a monthly basis by an Islamist, effectively, we just had 2 in the space of the last month as we're recording this. 33%, I think, of British Muslims want Sharia law in Britain, like according to polls. More than half want to ban.
I haven't seen these polls.
Well, we can put them in for people to see.
Because
More than half
you don't know anything about the UK.
Right? So when you say people aren't coming in to introduce an Islamist stuff, well, some of them want to if they're in a position to do so. We have 5 MPs who are effectively elected on a sectarian ticket, like as in we are Muslims, vote for us because you're a Muslim.
Who would you say those MPs are?
The 5 independent MPs, they're called the Gaza MPs or whatever way you want to call them. Right?
Are you talking about like Zara Sultana?
I don't know if she's one of them. I think one of them is called Adnan Hussein. There's 5 of them. We can look them up. We can put them in for people to see. Right. So I think it should be said that the overwhelming majority of British Muslims don't want Sharia law. But if 33% of them do, you can see why a lot of people who don't want Sharia law might be concerned about that, right?
Sure. I don't know what I haven't seen these.
The annoying thing too about this guy is that like when you're a leftist, like a socialist communist, and you refuse to engage in any type of cultural or ideological analysis, and this is the feeling that I had when I turned when Ron Paul was in 2008. I must have been 20. This is like the epiphany that you come to after you've read your first Ayn Rand book and you're like a hardcore libertarian. You're like, oh my God, everything in life just comes down to like government regulation and the freedom to do what you want. And as long as that is fine, then every single person will make the ideal same choice. Like, no, hold on. There's a lot of different things that power people. There's a lot of different things that power people's ideological, or a lot of things that power people's motivations. And they could be ideological, they could be financial. That one propaganda model that the NSA or the CIA or whatever put together demonstrating how Russia like flips agents onto their side. It's different things that can power people. Somebody look this up because I've repeated this a lot to make sure I'm not lying about this. I repeat this a lot because I feel like I read it in the past, but I don't trust anything pre-Vyvanse. Wasn't it the fact that most of the Muslims that went to join ISIS were middle class? They weren't just poor, destitute people. They were middle class people in Europe that felt like they had no purpose and they weren't integrating well into the society. Somebody look that up for me and see if I'm right or wrong on that. Go.
These polls, and I also don't know what British Muslims or the 33% that are saying they want Sharia law, like what they're talking about.
If you want slop.
ISIS foreign fighters. Why do foreigners join the caliphate? The number of ISIS foreign fighters is positively correlated with a country's GDP per capita and it's HDI. So positively correlated, meaning they both, so the higher a country's GDP per capita and the higher they are on the Human Development Index, the more likely, or the higher the number of ISIS foreign fighters. I'm assuming they control for population size and everything else, but yeah. I don't know how much they have on information about the individual countries with large Muslim populations, such as Pakistan, India, and Indonesia have very few ISIS fighters relative to the size of their Muslim population. This relation also is true in absolute terms. The total number of ISIS foreign fighters from India, Indonesia, and Pakistan, with a combined population of over 560 million Muslims, equals 793. God damn. Are they even trying? God damn, Finland. I feel like, were there like 12 Muslims that lived in Finland and like 8 of them were like, this place sucks, let's go. Just kidding, sorry. So this is number of foreign ISIS fighters per 10,000 Muslims in population. I wonder if there's a weird confound in terms of like the people from wealthier countries can afford to travel to go join ISIS. I don't know if ISIS was giving travel stipends to buy your plane ticket. I used to have this problem until maybe a couple years ago where I overanalyzed people based on just like amount of money they're being paid. But I think ideology, I do think, drives people more than I used to give it credit for in the past. And I think people overlook that a lot.
The counterexample always is, I mean, there's plenty of right-wing forces in the country that also want to ban homosexuality. Or trans people in general, right?
No,
like
no one wants to ban trans people in Britain. No.
Okay, well, that's not what I have seen so far, but maybe I'm wrong on this.
What do you mean?
But I mean, I feel like there's a lot of this is a point of contention for you guys as well. But it's like when you want to ban trans people altogether, when you want to remove access to medication for trans people to transition and conform their own gender identity, you don't start off by saying we want to altogether ban trans people. You start off by trying to find the most successful approach that the broadest majority of the masses would be in tune with, would be in agreement with, and then you slowly but surely expand on it.
Wouldn't that be like me saying, well, you say you want socialism, but actually you're a communist because you just want to edge your way towards communism step by step?
I mean,
that seems like an unfair way of looking at it.
My retort to that would be that while I don't call myself a communist, I don't have an issue with an end goal of communism. I don't think it's like I just think that it's probably not likely to happen as stateless.
Wasn't that a bad argument? Because like, well, what if you have a bunch of Muslims whose end goal isn't hardcore Sharia law, but they're okay with it? Isn't that not a great argument?
This moneyless, borderless society, but moving towards that end goal, I don't have any real...
You'd like communism in America?
I think that communism would be most likely an international thing. It'd be like the Star Trek universe. And it feels, especially at this point, it feels far too utopian to achieve. So while I think that the concept in and of itself is not one that I disagree with, and I don't think you would either. Don't you think it would be nicer?
I grew up in a communist country. I very strongly disagree with the concept of communism.
The USSR was, as you know as well, trying to implement communism. They never actually were able to successfully implement communism.
How do you mean?
Well, it wasn't a borderless, moneyless, classless society, right?
That was never the goal of communism. It was never to be a borderless, moneyless society.
No, that is what communism is.
Well, that's not how the communists in Russia defined it.
Well,
there was a big debate within communism quite early on, which was about, are we pursuing a global state of communism?
Is this the Trotsky versus Stalin or Lenin versus Stalin, this argument early on, for is it just for us or for the whole world or whatever?
Trotsky versus Stalin. I'm very familiar.
Right, but for our audience, this might be worth explaining.
Yeah.
Some of them they basically recognized the only way you might ever get to a communist society is if everyone in the world gets it. Otherwise, there will always be a capitalist system to which people would be keen to defect. Or, this is the Stalin option that they ended up going for, is you pursue communism within the realm of one country. And in order to do that, they took the wealth away from people who had it. They tried to distribute it to everybody else. They tried to create a state of equality, uplift the poor, as you were talking about. And actually, if you take those measures alone, they were very successful at it. Mm-hmm. The only problem is they ended up putting millions of people in camps in order to do that, creating a tyrannical regime with a secret police that murdered people. And that is the reason communism, in my opinion, doesn't work, is because in order to achieve that goal of equality, and basically you're making everybody equally poor as the end result, you actually have to use a lot of force, right? So that was communism, what we had in the USSR.
Well, the end goal was never successfully achieved in the USSR in terms of establishing what I'm talking about, though. And that's why I'm saying it's important to understand and recognize the failures of this implementation in the aftermath of a socialist revolution. What
were the failures? Ask him, what were the failures?
Those mistakes.
So how would you do it differently?
Well, that's the reason why I pointed to China. China is run by the Communist Party of China. It bills itself as communist. China is not a communist country. Would you say China is a communist country?
It's a mixed country. It has some elements of communism, but it's also got a lot of capitalism going on.
Yeah,
right?
so it's a mixed market economy is what you're saying, right? But so is the United States.
So is the United States. Whoa, it's the same thing. Whoa, it's the same thing. That's what I say when I'm standing next to Canute, and he's like, I'm way leaner than you. And it's like, well, you have some fat. And you have some lean muscle mass. And so do I. We're a mix, bro. Both of us. We're both a mix. We're both the same. We both got some fat, some muscles.
You look at it from that perspective, because America also has some semblance of social safety nets. The UK also has some social safety nets, some state-run enterprises, especially pre-Margaret Thatcher, I would say, versus private enterprises as well. Venezuela at its peak, I think, had more privatization and more private enterprise in its economy than France did, as a matter of fact. I believe there was like a report around 2012, maybe, where they were talking about how like Venezuela is not socialist. So when these sorts of countries, and you're not wrong, it's a mixture of both, right? It exists. Social safety nets exist, some extrapolation.
So is socialism social safety nets and communism is social safety nets, or is it the workers own the means of production, or is it a stateless, borderless, moneyless society? The reason why it's actually really important to push on these terms is because tankies like this fucking retard, they play a very disingenuous game where what they manage to do is they manage to take credit for all of the good things that capitalism has produced, and then they manage to blame all the bad things that capitalism has produced on capitalism. So capitalism has created enough wealth to have social safety nets in the United States. But a tanky like Hasan will look at the US and go, the only reason social safety nets exist, that's socialism, baby. Capitalism is evil. They hate it. It's like, well, excuse me. This is a capitalist framework, and we have social safety nets. Within our democratic, liberal government and our capitalist form of economy, we have social safety nets. Fuck you. You can't take credit for that. That can't be a socialist achievement. That's bullshit. It's bullshit how they try to do that. They'll let their socialism creep in and take credit for things that a democratic, liberal, capitalist society produced, and then try to blame all the folly on the capitalist economic organization. It's especially funny because I'm pretty sure Marx said that the only way communism or socialism, the only way that could work is that it has to be the next step of evolution from capitalism, because only a capitalist economy could produce enough wealth that could even be expropriated or eventually turned over to the worker. That would never happen in a socialist form of organization.
Initiatives exist, like when you think about Norway, for example, the entirety of the extraction industry in Norway is actually nationalized, from forestry all the way down to the oil and gas industry. But then there's also the private market as well, private enterprise as well. So as far as that goes, I wouldn't say that China is a communist, and neither would you, but it's run by a communist party. And so far, they have seen a pretty successful, pretty robust level of growth and development overall. So
it's a developing country, of course. What the fuck kind of analysis is that? So is India. So is, like, almost every African country has seen like explosions in development and growth. You can see the lowering of like the infant mortality and the birth rates and everything else. And okay, it's such a broad, pointless, meaningless argument that like I don't even know. It's like he's not even wrong. It's just like it's so worthless. Like, what are we even talking about?
Have seen a pretty successful, pretty robust level of growth and development overall. So they have analyzed the failures of previous communist and socialist formations, and they have responded to it in their own way.
The challenge is, Hasan, when you centralize power and you give practically all the power to the government, what happens with that is It's
also funny too, because depending on the argument you go with, like, how has China been able to grow so much? Well, one is the incredible amount of wealth that's that's gotten into the country, and like, well, how does wealth get into the country? Through foreign direct investment, which comes from wealthier capitalist countries, or due to the fact that they can manufacture so much and sell it to who? The world's wealthiest consumers, which are the capitalist American consumers or capitalist European consumers, right? China's literally growing on the backs of this foreign capitalist system that's helping them grow as much as they are. So, like, to just say that, oh, well, the socialism is helping, it's cringe.
Far more likely to have corruption. You're far more likely to have abuse of power. And inevitably, what happens is that...
Oh, but what about American companies? He's about to say it.
The government can't do everything. There are things that are far better done by private practice than done by state control.
So if I agree with that. Would you also agree that there are things that are far better done in the hands of the government, or at least with like heavy market regulation and intervention?
I completely agree.
Because like healthcare, I think, is a great example of this, where like it's an inelastic demand, good, and service, right? If you don't have healthcare, you die. So you will pay whatever price you have to pay for healthcare.
That's not. He's not using. Healthcare is absolutely not an inelastic demand. Maybe healthcare as an entire industry is an inelastic demand, but there's plenty of elasticity all across the spectrum inside the healthcare industry. But whatever.
And therefore, I think the American system that is the most maximalist, most capitalist, most like free enterprise system has been an abject failure in terms of delivering good results. And what I mean by that is healthcare as a whole is supposed to improve people's living standards and also make sure that everyone is getting the best quality care possible, right?
Possible? What does that mean? Everyone is getting the best quality care possible? Well, to what extent? There's only so many resources, right?
And in the United States of America, we don't have that. We do have nicer hospitals that resemble hotels, as
I'll be
opposed
honest
to like.
With you, it'd be difficult not to have a nicer hospital than the UK, mate.
Yeah, no, but I understand that. I'm from Turkey. I've seen the Turkish public hospitals, but I would rather try to focus on the diminished quality of service and try to improve that in a socialized system than to altogether limit healthcare at the point of being able to pay for it in the way that we have in the United States of America. And I think this is a major issue with America in general, is that we are so invested in improving our GDP. We're so invested in leaning into the forces of capital that in this sector and in many others, corruption still thrives. We have it in the form of corporate consolidation here in the United States of America, because in the absence of any sort of government intervention, trust busting, and heavy regulatory intervention, all corporations end up trying to seize one another and become a force, a monopolistic force, and if not, an oligopoly, right? And many sectors have seen this. And when you become an oligopoly, you can diminish the quality of service that you're offering slowly but surely because there's no market competition that exists any longer. So I guess the way I look at it is, in terms of corruption, you're right. There is a tendency, if the government is all powerful, even though the governments are always all powerful, there is a tendency in more centralized governance that if someone wants to be a ruthless autocrat, they can do so. And the people don't always have the capacity to rise up against that. But I would say that in the United States of America, for example, we also experience a similar dynamic. We just don't see it in the same way because it's not the most...
See, the thing that I hate about this analysis too is this idea of like, oh, corporations are evil and they can take over everything. Yeah, they can, but we do have a government that can serve as a counterbalance to that. And oftentimes it does. And when you try to say that all of it is the same shit and the government can't do anything, well, then you miss like Trump coming in now and being in bed with corporations in ways that are unprecedented in U.S. history. And now you miss that whole analysis because in your mind, well, it was the same under Biden, it was the same under everybody else anyway. It's like, well, no, it wasn't. It's not. Donald Trump is sucking off certain companies and giving preferential treatment to certain companies in ways that no president has ever done before. The idea that you go to the president and ask for reprieve from certain tariffs, or that he'll invest in your corporation, or that he'll have his own fucking businesses that our foreign policy or domestic policy might be reliant on. It's unprecedented. And to say that it's like all the same shit, he's not necessarily saying that here, but he does believe this, and he would say it on stream. I know he would.
Direct form of authoritarianism, where a lot of people think, well, as long as I can eat a Big Mac, as long as I can watch TV, as long as I can consume porn and gamble on the unregulated cryptocurrency market, or gamble my modest income away, what remains after I give the rest to my landlord, then things are probably fine. And I think we dull our sensibilities in that regard. And I think it's a different form, it's a different mechanism of control that makes you think that you are actually an active participant in this.
I mean, I think that's quite a stretch, Hasan, with all respect, because the difference between, we talked about some societies that have attempted to pursue communism, China, the Soviet Union, Venezuela, etc., right? The difference between those countries is not that they can't eat a Big Mac. The difference is that if they criticize the government, in Russia today even, but of course in the Soviet Union previously, you're going to get killed, right? In America, that's not what happens. Right? In America,
he's going to say, oh, actually, I got riot gear.
Know where we're going to go yet.
I mean, Hasan, to be fair, you're a very successful...
I agree with you.
You in China or in the Soviet Union would be killed if you were critical of that regime.
I would definitely be jailed.
You'd definitely be jailed. So that's the difference between these countries and America. It's not a Big Mac, it's freedom.
No, so I love that you brought that up because I agree with that. I'm from Turkey, a country that has never had the First Amendment or freedom of speech. And ironically enough, the current regime, the person in charge of the current regime, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, was jailed in the past for a poem that he wrote for incitement, right? He read a poem about Atatürk, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and he was jailed. And now he's one of the most ruthless jailers of the press in the country.
Right.
Now, so I come from that background. I can't go back to Turkey, for example,
right.
For these reasons. I've written about Turkey extensively, and let's just say the administration is not super fond of me in my perspective. Having said that, that is the reason why I want the First Amendment to remain in the United States of America, even though, as I brought up earlier, there have been instances throughout American history where the First Amendment has been actively violated or threatened. There are still contemporary examples of violations of the First Amendment. One example I will use is the anti-boycott, divestment, and sanctions laws that exist in the United States of America.
Yes. Oh, Israel, yes.
Famously was Bernie Sanders and Dianne Feinstein, rest in peace, who actively called it out. Two prominent Jewish politicians in the country. These are laws directly written by AIPAC that dictate that if you want to become a school teacher in the state of Texas, for example, you have to sign a loyalty pledge to ensure that you never protest against the state of Israel. It's ridiculous, right? And it's a direct violation of the First Amendment. So there is encroachment towards the First Amendment.
That will always happen because people will always contest it. But the point I'm making to you is when you compare China and the Soviet Union and Venezuela to America, that is not an accurate comparison.
It's not an accurate comparison, but if you recall earlier, I just said, I'm worried that we here in the United States of America are now moving in that direction in terms of social repression, in terms of political repression. And this is something that I very much fear. And I think the entry point to this is usually around Israel and what people decry as anti-Semitism. But that's not where it's going to end. If you look at the Trump administration's the active initiatives the administration is taking, yesterday, my friend Kat Abugzaleh, who used to be a reporter who's now running in Illinois for Congress, was indicted. She was indicted because she participated in the protest against ICE outside of an ICE facility. And there are videos of her getting slammed to the ground in the concrete with this militarized, masked federal police force, right? Not only did they beat her up, which was already ridiculous to begin with, but then they also chose to indict her.
I think the important thing to remember here is that Kamala would have done the exact same thing, remember?
Examples of students writing for their student newspaper and getting kidnapped and thrown into a immigrant detention facility, whether it be Mahmoud Khalil, who still has an ongoing legal case for being a student activist, a student protester, and having a green card while doing it.
We have the same thing in our country in different ways. I hear you. Sorry, the reason I'm interrupting you is we've moved sideways from the topic. So remember where we started this conversation, right? So just to address your point.
The repression didn't start in China by everybody being like, all right, it's over, we're throwing you in jail. It builds up to it is what I mean. And it's entirely dependent on the starting point. Because if you were looking at China, if you're looking at the Chinese Civil War, post-World War II, 30 million Chinese people have been slaughtered ruthlessly by the Japanese imperialists. Like, that's a very different material. That's a very different set of materials.
30 million people. Who else died in China after that? All right, we're missing, the tally's a little short there. So.
Circumstances for the end of that civil war and to develop governance.
No.
Similar to
I'm
the
just trying to bring you back to the central argument, the central discussion we're having. Francis made the point that when the government is in a position to be authoritarian, where it seems to inevitably end up in every communist country in the history of the world, right? That is a situation which inevitably then leads to levels of repression of the kind that you will not see in America for 100 years. I take your point about individual protesters or individual people who've made statements about.
Is he getting better at these talks, or they're not pushing much? Well, what he's doing is, it feels like the same thing that Cenk is doing. Hasan is good. Cenk had this issue, I would argue, when he did that speech with Charlie Kirk. Because these guys are populist, they end up agreeing with a lot of stupid fucking stuff, because that's how populists work, okay? They end up agreeing on a lot of dumb shit. And what they think is when they go on, well, maybe I can push for some of this. Nope, zero agreement on any of this. They don't get any agreement here. They always get a ton of pushback. And the other side, never, ever. They don't even get to touch this. They don't even bring this up. So Hasan, Cenk did this with Charlie. Oh, we agree on so many things. We should have a beer, blah, 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 blah. And then he's like, and maybe, guys, maybe the trans stuff. And it's like, boo. And then it's like, okay, well, I guess nothing. So you get nothing. And you don't even get to attack them on their points, right? On the things that you disagree with. So it just ends up being like this stupid fucking slop fest of you're debating on your side and you're agreeing with like 80% of what they say, which I think is not good.
A highly controversial issue today. We have the same thing in our country where people are being sent to prison for tweets that they've done, right? Left and right. We've got Palestine Action on the left. We've got right-wing people criticizing immigration. So I agree with you. The direction of travel in the West in terms of freedom of expression is not good. And I've made that point in my book and elsewhere. But that is not the same as what the point we're trying to make, which is the system of government you are open to, based on our discussion today at least, inevitably leads to authoritarianism, which inevitably leads to repression on a scale that a Western country won't imagine. Isn't that's the reason that a lot of people are very worried about people like you who say they're open to communism?
Here, I'll try to put a nice button on it, okay? Mm-hmm. The reason why the United States of America and countries that are under the security apparatus, the global security umbrella of the United States of America, have had much more success with liberal democracy as opposed to all these other countries that are not.
It's because they've exploited all the other countries.
Under the immediate security umbrella, is because it's been the domineering force around the globe, especially after the end of the Cold War, but even during the Cold War, it was a dominant force on the planet. Sure. When you are the dominant force,
But why are they? Isn't that like begging the question? The reason why America and the capitalist countries were better than the socialist countries is because they were better than the socialist countries. Okay, what did we say that nothing was said there? Like, can you tell me why John was able to beat Jane in a fight every single time? Well, John was able to beat Jane every single time because John was a better fighter. It's like, okay, well, you didn't really say anything there. This is like tautology. Like what you're saying a thing is like what?
Had security apparatus, the global security umbrella of the United States of America, have had much more success with liberal democracy as opposed to all these other countries that are not under the immediate security umbrella, is because it's been the domineering force around the globe.
Why?
Especially after the end of the Cold War, but even during the Cold War, it was a dominant force on the planet. Sure. When you are the dominant force, you get to have these freedoms. Your people get to have these freedoms. Your people get to say whatever they want because they're not a threat, right? I would be more of a threat in the respective nation that I'm in if they don't have that same level of security. And that is the reason why I'm very fearful, because as America's power on the global stage is waning, we are going to see more direct authoritarianism coming from Western nations as liberalism decays, as it did in the 20s and the 30s. And what came after that was a wave of fascism. Now, fascism at that time was seen as a revolutionary thing. It was seen as a new thing. In many instances, fascists were actually fashioning themselves as though they were like a different kind of socialist, even though they were mostly killing socialists and had their beef with socialists. And then they were able to align with liberals eventually and become the domineering authoritarian force. And I think you guys wouldn't disagree with me that, like, Italy's Mussolini and Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany were ruthless fascist forms of governance where there was unimaginable repression. My fear is that is where capitalism inevitably leads.
Why?
If they might disagree with you, you think that these guys are going to support Hitler and Mussolini? Wait, what? Did I misunderstand him?
Had their beef with socialists, and then they were able to align with liberals eventually and become the domineering authoritarian forces. And I think you guys wouldn't disagree with me that.
You guys wouldn't. He said you wouldn't disagree with me. Not you might not disagree with me. Or you might, okay. He said wouldn't disagree.
Okay. Italy's Mussolini and Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany were ruthless fascist forms of governance where there was unimaginable repression. My fear is that is where capitalism inevitably leads.
Why?
If left unaddressed, because capitalism is always going to deteriorate. It's slowly going to improve material conditions as opposed to feudalism. It's a far better system, for sure. It's far better than monarchies, right? I agree. But there will come a point where it outlives its usefulness And those who own the capital, the owners of capital, will have to make a decision. There's too much instability. There's too much chaos. We need to restore order. And if they can't do that through liberal democracy, at least historically, especially when there is a counterbalance revolutionary socialism out there that they are genuinely fearful of, work stoppages happening all around, and the flows of capital being disrupted, and profit margins are threatened, they end up finding fascism to be that domineering force that restores the law and order, so that people are still working in the factories, and any kind of dissent is directly and indirectly suppressed. And I fear that that is where we're moving in the United States of America, as America's global superpower status is threatened by the rise of China.
So your thesis is that as country, if a different country was dominant, was a global hegemon, they would have more freedom for their citizens.
Yeah.
So you think the Chinese Communist Party would allow criticism of them if they were the dominant country in the
I
West?
think with respect to where they were in terms of the most maximalist position is the Cultural Revolution, right? Like if you look at the Cultural Revolution versus where China is now in terms of dissent, it's in comparison to the United States of America. Yes, there's still heavy control over that sort of stuff. There's a lot of surveillance. Having said that, it has become far more tolerant as material conditions have improved. And that's my main thesis, is that countries, regardless of their individual forms of governance, as long as they are advancing the material needs of the broadest subsect of the masses, will and become like a domineering force on their own and have full sovereignty and full autonomy, they will inevitably become more tolerant to this kind of freedom, because this is the most successful way, I think, of making sure that the masses feel satisfied. Civil liberties is the most successful way that I think neoliberalism has become a hegemonic power, beyond the endless militarism and whatnot. I think that is the reason why people feel the way that they do in the United States of America, in spite of all of the alarm bells that are ringing about how economic devastation is imminent, seemingly, or there's so much poverty and so much instability, and people still go, well, at least I got some freedoms, right? As opposed to not having those freedoms elsewhere. So that's my main thesis, is that if they improve material conditions, they have to inevitably allow more civil liberties, more social liberties.
So it's interesting what you've been saying about America, and that it's losing its power on the global stage. That is then reflected in more and more, shall we say, imbalanced chaos in the actual society itself. And we've kind of seen that in a way with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, with Luigi Mangione. I found some of your comments really interesting about Luigi. I'd love to talk to you about them. So you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, push back on me if I'm wrong, that you think that he's innocent and unfairly maligned. How did you come to that position, if I'm correct?
Well, I mean, that's a meme for the most part.
Okay.
What does it mean?
God, he did something. I didn't mean it. Ah! Don't worry, he'll get there. One sec.
We're not boomers, we're like elderly
the notion
millennials.
that someone is innocent until proven guilty, or that he wasn't there, it's like a common thing that people do on TikTok and elsewhere as well. But
You don't think he's innocent?
well, I don't know. I don't know if he's the one that actually did it or not. We'll see once the court case finalizes.
But is he? Sorry, I may not understand what meme means in this context. Like, I guess what I'm asking is, when you say he's unfairly maligned, do you believe that or not? That's what I'm asking.
Well, as far as unfairly maligned, it depends on where the quote is coming from, because I could be talking about like being perp walked or getting hit with a terrorism charge, which was actually taken off recently, because the New York courts also found that it was overextended to this case. I think there was a lot of panic around his actions, allegedly. And that is probably what I was talking about, if you're talking about that. But as far as like, Luigi's innocent, it's just like a thing people say. As far as innocent,
Why do they say it?
Yeah, he's such a weasel fuck, dude.
I think that is actually the more interesting conversation.
Okay.
The reason that, and I had a conversation with Ross Douthat about this on the New York Times, where he brought this up on numerous occasions. I think that people are experiencing tremendous anger and discontent, and one of the most visible aspects of that, one of the visible aspects of
Right, so the language of the unheard. He's doing this thing where like you justify and you support. Oh, this is like this strategy where, like, let's say that you smash a mirror because you get so mad, and somebody's like, "Why'd you smash a mirror?" And then you give this analysis like the action isn't okay, but you explain why people get there. But like you did it and you justify it. So like, why are you doing that? They'll be like, well, sometimes when people get really mad, they do stupid things, and like people can just act out and they can get physical, and it's just people. It happens when people get mad. It's like, I'm not asking you that. Like, do you think like breaking the mirror was okay, or do you think you did something wrong? It's like, I broke the mirror. I think it's fine. Okay, but like, why? Well, when people get upset, people can do bad, irrational, horrible, evil, terrible things. Okay, but then so you broke it. So it was like, do you defend that? Yeah. They do this thing where they navigate between these like descriptions and prescriptions, where it's like, well, this is what happens to a population on edge. It's like, hold on, that's not you, motherfucker. Like, you're not explaining you're not explaining why people support Luigi. You support Luigi. So explain why you support Luigi, and don't give a condescending, patronizing answer, because it applies to you, motherfucker. Tremendous
anger and discontent, and one of the most visible aspects of that, one of the visible aspects of a system of healthcare that should not be privatized, or should, at the very least, even if it's privatized, work to make sure that every single person is getting the adequate care that they need, otherwise they die, it has created this environment of tremendous anger. It has almost virtually universalized the pain. Every single American knows at least one immediate or distant relative that has suffered through chemotherapy, as they have to hunt down their insurance provider to make sure that the thing that they were paying for years and years, the premiums, the costly premiums that they were paying into, actually end up helping them cover the cost of this life-saving quality care that they desperately need to survive. And I think a lot of Americans have so much discontent for that experience that they have seen personally, that their immediate reaction, before they even found out who had done the shooting, but their immediate reaction to who the victim was met with a response that shocked me.
It was your response, motherfucker. What do you mean there? Why are you describing this in such a detached manner?
As well as I think many other people. What I mean by this, Americans are very draconian. They're very black and white. It's like, you do a crime, you get punished, and a lot worse than you would get punished elsewhere, right? We talk about, how Norway is much more understanding and much more rehabilitative in their prison structure because they're pussies. We throw you in jail and we torture you.
You have the death penalty.
Yeah, we have the death penalty, all this stuff.
States, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so, and Americans broadly, like American culture is broadly very receptive to that. We're fairly rugged in our approach to crime and punishment. And in spite of that, because of how much harm the private healthcare sector has done to so many different people in this country, I think they saw it as like, okay, well, this guy is the faceless placeholder for the person, for the system that actually killed my grandparents. That's the way they saw it.
I get the anger,
which I don't think is healthy, for the record.
Okay. Well, this is what I'm getting to, is like, I understand anger. And by the way, I don't want to wade into the debate about American healthcare. I don't know a lot about it. I understand there's some really bad situations for people. People should also know that in the UK, there's also lots of people who are dying without care because they're waiting for an operation for a year and a half, or they're waiting 2 months for a scan. Yes. But let's not get into that.
No, but the NHS is, you're right. The NHS has had significant austerity measures implemented.
Everything bad about the NHS is because of conservatives. Otherwise, it's perfect, though, right? Not to say that austerity and all this shit doesn't damage the NHS, but like,
to it.
The NHS budget keeps growing every year, but it doesn't matter. Let's not get into it. What I'm saying is, I understand people's anger. What I don't understand is why that would make Luigi Mangione, who allegedly killed this guy, innocent. Why? Because that's where we started, right?
Yeah,
why do people say he's innocent?
The way people see it, and I'm not subscribing to this notion, but the way that I think people see it is, are you familiar with the concept of social murder?
No.
Engels wrote about this. He said that like the systematized death and destruction of the masses is oftentimes hidden. It's oftentimes invisible. I think private healthcare is a great example of this, where it's to the recipient, to the victim, or the victim's families, they see that as murder, right? They see that as an unnecessary death that took place. And they feel that pain all the same, in the same way that that Brian Thompson...
Wait, hold on. This guy in chat's trying to trigger me. Hasan came after him, but he still popularized the whole politics with gaming genre and actually brought it to the mainstream on Twitch. I know Steven says he boosted him, but he's insanely overvaluing how popular he was back in those days. Hasan definitely popularized it. Back in 2018, 2019, what Steven was doing was incredibly niche, no matter how he tries to rewrite it. So by the time Hasan started to do politics, I don't even think he gamed much anymore. I think that's actually a Hasan rewrite, that he wanted to do gaming and politics together. By the time he started doing, his huge explosion of growth was like watching fucking 90 Day Fiancé or whatever. And then by the time he started doing politics more and more, I think he kind of left. He wasn't doing much gaming almost at all. Maybe with a brief pit stop into the Among Us era.
His family, I'm sure, was and it still is mourning the death of Brian Thompson. There are millions of Americans out there that have individuals in their lives that they loved, loved ones, immediate loved ones, distant relatives that they've seen suffer in their final moments as they, go through the process of trying to figure out the paperwork in a system that is designed to, let's be real, take as much money as possible from you in the form of premiums, and then create a profit incentive by refusing to pay for the healthcare.
Hasan, I get all that.
That's not where the profit incentive comes from, but okay.
And I empathize with that pain that those people feel. Yeah. But what I'm getting at is, you said he's innocent, then you said it's a meme, you say it's just a thing that people say. What I'm trying to understand is...
The reason why people say that is because I think...
Their anger doesn't make him innocent, right?
No,
if he shot a man who runs a healthcare company, healthcare insurance company,
yeah,
and they are angry with healthcare in America, that doesn't make him innocent, right?
It doesn't.
So isn't you and them saying that just flat out wrong?
Well, my reason for saying it is because you're innocent until proven guilty. But as far as what everyone else is saying, or if I'm to analyze it, which I do as a part of my job, what I'm trying to explain to you guys is that from their perspective, it's revenge. And this is a very, very unhealthy feeling to have. This is why I talked about with Ross Dow that the concept of adventurism. This is something that traditional Marxists actually are very critical of. Adventurism does not lead to any sort of serious changes, any sort of serious revolutionary changes especially. And yet, and all it does is create an environment of instability. I think that the perfect solution to ensure that this never happens, to ensure that there's no level of discontent that bubbles up to this degree, that would require a mechanism of enforcement by the government to enact stability, of course, which would also be just as violent, if not even more brutal, to a larger percentage of the population, to ensure that there isn't another, Luigi Mangione style situation, is good legislation is fixing these systemic problems. Luigi Mangione is the breaking point. Luigi Mangione is the perfect demonstration of the system failing people. And I think that Luigi Mangione and the response to him,
He was from a rich family who didn't have like negative experiences with healthcare because he didn't have the money for it. This is just a total fantasy, but okay.
has been one of the clearest examples that I have seen in a country like the United States of America, where people are normally supposed to be like horrified by cold-blooded murder in the middle of the day. Their response being much more receptive to the action shows me
In the middle of the day, didn't he kill him at night?
that there's so much pain in people's immediate experiences that they recognize this instability. They don't have a vehicle to communicate it. They don't have a vehicle to communicate this discontent, and they're simply moving into the least productive way to do politics, which is revenge.
I heard his back was messed up. Is that not true? People spread this meme around, but there was no evidence ever that. I think he might have had a back injury earlier on, but like sometimes people get back injuries. But there was no evidence that I ever saw posted that like he couldn't afford something in a hospital, and because of that, his healthcare couldn't, his insurance. There's nothing like that. I think he might have had a back injury earlier on, but like some people get injured. Like I mean, what?
Violent revenge. I think that that is something that we have to solve immediately, because it can't go on. You can't have more people just like randomly gunning people in the streets. That's not what a civilized society is supposed to work towards. That's instability. That's chaos. I don't want that.
Let me introduce you to the people I work with to protect my family against financial instability, inflation, and turmoil. For me, one of the best ways to safeguard your wealth is by investing in gold, and that's why I trust the Pure Gold Company. Here's a smart tip. If you buy UK minted gold coins like sovereigns, you won't pay VAT when you buy them or capital gains tax when you sell. All the profit is yours to keep. And the best part, gold is a completely private investment. It's outside the banking system, so it can't be manipulated by governments or anyone else. Unlike digital assets, it's yours in the truest sense. The Pure Gold Company is trusted by first-time investors and seasoned professionals alike. What I really appreciate about them is a knowledgeable, pressure-free approach. They explain everything clearly, so you feel confident about your decisions, and they never push you to buy. Physical gold has stood the test of time as a store of value, and it offers peace of mind that other assets can't match. It's reassuring to know that even if the banking system falters, your gold and its value remains safe. Whether you're looking to diversify your investments, protect your savings, or just gain the security of owning a real physical asset, we highly recommend the Pure Gold Company. Click the link in the description or go to pure-gold.co/trigger to get your free copy of the investor guide. That's pure-gold.co/trigger. Take control of your financial future today.
Awesome.
So one of the things that I found shocking with the assassination of Charlie Kirk is obviously the incident itself, but it's also the reaction and the rhetoric that went around it. The people on the left who were celebrating it, which to me is, and to most right-thinking people, is absolutely abhorrent, and also the reaction on the left, and there were some people, particularly large influencers, whose what they said was unforgivable. Where did you stand on it, and what were your opinion? People, particularly to most right-thinking people, is absolutely abhorrent, and also the reaction on the left, and there were some people, particularly large influencers, whose
Wait, did you just say the left twice? Wait, hold on.
Trick that went around it. The people on the left who were celebrating it, which to me is, and to most right-thinking people, is absolutely abhorrent, and also the reaction on the left, and there were some people, particularly large influencers, whose what they said was unforgivable. Where did you stand on it, and what were your opinions on the whole incident?
I mean, I was shocked. It was horrifying, but mainly horrifying because like it's impossible for me not to have a personal stake in this, because I was about to debate Charlie in 2 weeks, like 2 weeks prior to his assassination, or 2 weeks after his assassination. We were supposed to be debating at Dartmouth College, and this was a person that I had basically developed a political career in competition with, if that makes sense. Like I was on the left side, he was on the right side. We debated plenty of times. We debated at Politicon. We were very familiar with one another, and seeing that.
How many times have they debated? Well, I thought it was once or twice. What? Maybe it was more than that. I just missed it. Maybe earlier in his career.
That the number one fear that every person that does what I do become reality in real time was shocking. It was devastating. As far as my opinions on it, I mean, I had the misfortune of seeing it in real time happen as I was like trying to figure out what had taken place, and we were one of the first media outlets that actually broke the story. And
I didn't hear what he said. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Time was shocking. It was devastating. As far as my opinions on it, I mean, I had the misfortune of seeing it in real time happen as I was like trying to figure out what had taken place, and we were one of the first media outlets that actually broke the story.
Bro, it was live streamed. What? What are you talking about, bro? Okay.
And my first thought was that this is going to lead to even more violence in the form of revenge, decentralized violence, and also that this is going to lead to state repression as well, in an effort to stamp out any kind of political discontent or any kind of political dissent, which hasn't fully come to fruition yet, thankfully, but the administration certainly tried to use this as an opportunity to build new guidelines around or any kind of political dissent, which hasn't fully come to fruition yet, thankfully, but the administration certainly tried to
Trump literally has been declaring domestic groups, terrorist group, Antifa. He declared a domestic terrorist group. What do you mean this hasn't come to fruition yet in any way? How long ago was this recorded? What the fuck? Okay. Use
this as an opportunity to build new guidelines around surveillance and build new surveillance targets in general. The Trump administration has this, they released a memorandum, national security memorandum, that declared the intelligence communities to shift their priorities and attention of surveillance to Antifa, which they had previously declared a domestic terrorist organization, which is not a designation that exists in the United States of America because it is at direct odds with the First Amendment. This is the reason why the KKK is not considered a domestic terror organization. This is the reason why the Proud Boys and Atomwaffen, which is like a neo-Nazi formation that tries to recruit from the military, none of these guys none of these organizations, even if you would normally consider them domestic terror organizations, are actually considered that. So it was a severe violation of the First Amendment, and then the follow-up to the surveillance targets and surveillance priorities made me even more fearful about where this administration was going, where they declared any sort of anti-Christian, anti-capitalist, anti-American sentiment to be an indication of someone being an extremist, violent terrorist potentially. But then on top of that, there was even more vague things that they brought up. Like I think it was like being critical of the American moral family unit or something like that. Basically, it was just what the Republicans consider what the entirety of the liberal and all the way to extreme leftists or whatever think about the Republicans was now up for grabs in terms of priority targets for the surveillance apparatus. And like I said, we don't know where this is going to go for the time being. It is directly at odds with the First Amendment, but there have been some instances where people have been indicted. Kat Abu-Ghazaleh, like I said, who's running for office, is like one of the first high-profile politicians that have been targeted in this way.
By the way, this is the moment he broke the Charlie Kirk story. I don't know if we've even watched this before.
Former mayoral candidate Jim Walden wants off.
Charlie Kirk just got shot at UVU, unconfirmed, but it looks like what just happened. Okay, first of all, you literally are a New York Times photojournalist. Please don't do this, okay? This doesn't mean Charlie Kirk got shot, okay? This just means shots fired at the Charlie Kirk UVU event. That's a crazy leap. We don't know what happened. Please, don't come in here with breaking news like this, guys. We will get there. Look at his page.
We have seen this before? Oh, maybe I just wasn't.
Make Utah great again. What? Who is this guy? He said Charlie Kirk was shot. That's crazy. If that's the case, if that was the case, there'd be fucking video footage of it, I'm pretty sure. I mean, it's Utah. It's not that backwards, okay? There's other accounts. None of them are journalists saying Charlie Kirk got shot. Okay, find me a video of the incident and I'll... Okay, that's not a video of the incident. That's just people saying Charlie Kirk has been killed in Provo, Utah. What the fuck? Charlie Kirk just got shot in the neck. Please stop. They don't got internet in Utah or cameras? Okay, that is crazy. Does this mean your debate is canceled? Yes, that would mean the debate is canceled. If he got fucking shot in the neck. What the fuck is happening? Mike Lee, I am tracking the situation at Utah Valley University closely. Please join me in praying for Charlie Kirk and the students gathered there. How is it shots fired at Charlie Kirk event at Utah Valley University? Shots have been fired at Charlie Kirk event at Utah Valley University. Footage from the scene showed event goers screaming as shots rang out on Wednesday. People at the event took to social media to share details of the moment someone opened fire at the conservatives event. Kirk published a post on X just minutes before reports of the shooting emerged. How is there no footage of this? What the fuck is going on? Okay, there's a live stream.
Not the gang violence.
Did this live stream show the shots being fired? Why do you want to see your political opponent get shot so badly? What? Bro, what will it take for you to believe? Wait, first of all, these two things are at odds with one another. It's my job to make sure that I fucking get this breaking news story correctly. That's
got
number
him.
one. And number two, what a fucking stupid ass joke to make, dude.
I got him. You won.
I have to confirm it.
Fuck you guys.
Like there are so many fucking cameras on these sorts of things. What the fuck are you talking about? Okay. And I worry that once free speech goes away and once due process goes away in this country, we are full tilt fascist.
Wow.
But I think that's a very valid point. My concern is as well, and it's the rhetoric that is getting ratcheted up on both sides, both on the right, but both on the left. So for instance, I'll give you an example. In my own country, we have Zara Sultana, who's a very prominent left-wing politician. She said the words, we need to fight the fascists in parliament. I'm like, okay. And then we need to fight them in the ballot box and we need to fight them in the streets. Now, the problem is, if you ask most people what fascism is, I don't think they would be able to give you a clear, coherent explanation or an analysis of the political ideology.
Well, let's be honest, by fascist, she means people like Reform who are not fascist. They are a centre-right party. They're not fascist.
So
I don't know if I'd agree with that.
Right. But the point...
Well, hold on a second. You think the Reform Party...
He's going to push
Reform Party, as it stands currently, is a nascent fascist parliamentary group that hasn't reached its full potential yet.
Could you define
in the same way that
fascism in this instance?
In the same way that I would say the modern Republican Party is, or was, throughout most of its history, a liberal party, a far right, but liberal party nonetheless, and it is becoming an illiberal or post-liberal party that is moving in the direction of fascism. Fascism is what's the best definition for it? Paleogenetic ultranationalism.
Paleogenetic? I don't even know what that means. Was that?
What's the best definition for it? Paleogenetic ultranationalism. a in-group, out-group dynamic that is constantly seeking to destroy the out-group and dominate the out-group, even if the out-group is actually a part of civilized society, and surrounding itself with this like mythologized understanding of this national or ethnic or religious mythology of the higher group.
Okay.
But it would also include authoritarianism, the end of the one-party state, like all of
Not
these.
always, but yeah, usually, yes.
So by which of those stands?
I don't know fuck all about Italy. Have there been multi-party fascist systems? Is that a thing you can have? Are there parliamentary debates between the multiple parties of any? Is that maybe? I don't know.
Would you say reform is a fascist or neo? I can't remember how you said a nascent fascist party.
Well, the reason why I said that is because Mussolini's fascist party was not a party that Mussolini's fascist party was an active fascist party within the parliament before it became the centralized form of governance.
But they
Same
said
with
we are fascist,
I know,
right?
but that was because the word fascism was just being invented at that point, and therefore it was still packaged as like a revolutionary, new, illiberal way.
Okay,
they didn't come into power. We now live in a post-World War II universe where like you can't say that you're fascist.
So you think that if Nigel Farage, which is currently they're leading the polls, you think that if he is elected, eventually he will suspend democracy, he will start pogroms against Muslims, using the state, he will, have a one-party state. You think that's where this is heading?
Bearing in mind that the chairman of Reform Party, Sia Yusuf, is a Muslim.
Yeah, still doesn't matter. There was
Palingenetic ultranationalism is the definition of true fascism proposed by political theorist Roger Griffith. Okay.
State. You think that's where this is heading?
Bearing in mind that the chairman of Reform Party, Sia Yusuf, is a Muslim.
Yeah, still doesn't matter. There was Jews that worked within the Nazi government command structure as well. It's just like there are always going to be people that come from they come from the background of the targeted outgroup in general, and it doesn't even end with Muslims, is what I mean. It's going to it always has to excise what it considers aberrations, and there's always, like with Nazi Germany, for example, the next stage, if they hadn't failed so dramatically in its endless militarism, would have most likely been to create the Übermensch structure, like the start going after people who were maybe brown-haired and didn't have blue eyes. There's an endless expansion of that sort.
And you think that's what reform will do? They'll suspend democracy, they'll start a one-party state.
This is super in the future if they actually get to that point, but I don't think that it is far-fetched to assume that, yes, reform through a process of initially reforms, I could totally see them getting to that position, yes.
What's your basis for saying that, though?
It's entirely dependent on how material conditions unwind. If it gets
material conditions,
to a point where there's tremendous economic stability, then instead of solving those issues in the same way that the American movement, the Trump movement, is not solving these issues, they will continue to be a force of political repression.
But what's your evidence for this? This is the thing I don't understand.
The evidence is the historical patterns that I'm looking at. The historical patterns of why fascism has been implemented in the past. And now, like I said, we live in a post-fascist world. We live in a nuclear world. The dynamic is different, okay? So fascism will not come as a third way, as an outsider any longer. I think instead you will see far-right elements within liberal society, within the parliamentary structure, move in that direction.
But my worry with this is, and this is why I'm not trying to debate bro you or anything. I'm genuinely engaging with what you're saying. I hope you feel that, right?
Yeah.
The issue I have in the context of the discussion we're having.
God, it's so cringe. I guess they agreed they're going to be gentle with each other. There's been whatever. It's all good.
About Charlie Kirk is, you've got a situation where you are calling reform fascists. I know some people in reform, they're not fascists. They don't believe in a one-party state. They don't want to end democracy, right? We've had Nigel Farage on our show. It's very clear where he's an old-school Thatcherite kind of guy, right? But you're saying he's a fascist. And my worry is...
I think he will get there.
Okay, you're saying he will get to fascism. Fair.
If material conditions get to a point where there's mass instability in an effort to...
It's a nascent fascist party that in the right context will become fascist. I get it, right?
And the same, not dissimilar to
here's my
the
point.
AFD, the Nationalists of France.
Reform is very different from the AFD, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
My point is this. If I thought the fascists were coming, I would feel it's my duty to participate in armed resistance against that. And my worry is part of where the political violence is coming from is people like you who are using this term, in my opinion, far too loosely and projecting historical analogies onto people that you're not that familiar with, actually. And then you're really putting a target on their back. And my worry is the reason Charlie Kirk was killed is there were far too many people calling him a fascist, which he wasn't, right? And that's my concern with all of this irresponsible language, which I think it is.
There's no evidence of that so far, but okay.
So what's interesting about the utilization of language here is the fact that you can't really point to a single Democratic Party politician that has celebrated Charlie Kirk's death.
Sure.
Yeah. But you can actually, in many instances, point to Republican politicians that have made a mockery of the Democratic
and we've
legislators.
had people make that point in the show. You don't need to make it because we've had. But you're on the left, I'm asking you about left.
The reason why I'm saying that is because there are always going to be people on the right and on the left that engage in this kind of commentary as a reflection of how much discontent that they experience. But ultimately, if
I'm saying you're one of them. You are calling reform fascist.
No. That's a totally, first of all, my analysis on the way, calling someone a fascist if they're exhibiting historic fascist tendencies is perfectly valid. The consideration that this actually is turning up the temperature as opposed to directly calling for violence against a nascent fascist party, as opposed to trying to deal with it through the existing means within the democratic structure, is ridiculous. There's no comparison here. Fascist movements, when they were initially forming, albeit in a much more violent time, engaged in street protests, and there were counter protests against it. Like I'm in favor of always exhausting all available options within the confines of liberal democracy. And I think what the problem is that a lot of people point to the endpoint of fascism and what they know is the endpoint of fascism and say, well, they have to be dealt with militarily and the time for that is now. I'm saying the time for that is not here, and I hope that it never gets there so that we can successfully resist against growing fascist movements that are born out of initially distractions or red herrings that put the crosshairs on some of the more vulnerable populations and try to deal with it within the existing confines of liberal democracy, and then try to get our politicians to address some of these material problems so that we don't have to exhibit the instability and even potentially a fascist form of governance that comes out of that instability that then at that point will be resisted against militarily through sabotage or through direct acts of war.
The issue that I have with your argument, Hasan, is you're saying they're exhibiting, on the way to fascism. You can make that argument about Keir Starmer and go, we're on the way to communism. But you laugh, but there are people on the right who say that.
Yeah.
Right? Okay?
Do you feel like they're also
but that's not my
they're
point.
putting a crosshair on Keir Starmer when they say that?
Yeah, we don't have the same issues with communism, but I think if you describe people as communists in this country, I think you're putting the crosshairs on people. I really do, because there are people.
I mean, I get called a terrorist every day.
And I think that's disgusting. That's putting crosshairs on you. And I absolutely, vehemently would say that is unacceptable. But my point is, when you use that language of fascism or communist, these are labels that have a very, very real emotional trigger to people, understandably so. And what you have in this country is, unfortunately, there is a decent swathe of the population who have severe mental illnesses, plus access to guns. And what inevitably happens is it leads to a Charlie Kirk situation, or it leads to somebody on the left like you, God forbid, happening.
Oh, I get a lot of death threats. Don't worry.
No, but I do worry, because it's a sign that a society is in crisis. And I agree. And I think that it's our responsibility, both people on this side, both people on your side, that we ratchet it down, Hasan.
I think that if we're talking about increasing the tension, people in positions of power have a lot more responsibility than random citizens that are, in many instances, reacting to that.
In all due respect, we're not random citizens. We've both successful. We've both got huge platforms.
I was just talking about like the broader left that you were talking about that said like, oh, they're celebrating Charlie Kirk or whatever. But beyond that, in terms of applying analysis to the actions of any person, Charlie Kirk or Nick Fuentes or whoever, and say that these are people who are implementing a lot of bigoted tendencies, a lot of racist opinions, and moving the American political direction towards fascist governance. I don't think that saying that you shouldn't be able to say that because you're invoking violent sentiment against your political opposition is crazy. I don't mind if people call me a communist. I don't mind if they call me a terrorist. It's not true, and it certainly makes a lot of people very angry, and they want to talk to me all the time about they want to kill me, come to my house, and murder me and my family. But it is unfortunately a part of the political discourse. I wish it didn't exist. But having said that, I am never going to stop myself from making accurate assessments and warning people that at this stage, we are at the precipice of something far more dangerous, especially in Western liberal democracies. Liberalism is genuinely failing. And that collapse.
Has he always used this type of language to explain politics? He sounds like Vosh. I think that Vosh punches up his language and he can sound a little bit pretentious, but regardless of whether I agree or disagree with Vosh, I don't think Vosh is just filling air. Like what he says, also what he says is still generally meaningful. Hasan is definitely, he's using flowery language because he has nothing of substance to say. And he tries to mask his lack of substance with very flowery language. I think it's a difference.
Is most likely going to bring about a lot of fascist governance that will try to restore order in the most militant ways, and it will resemble historic fascist patterns.
Hasan, look, firstly, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for entering into the spirit of debate in the way it's intended. Really appreciate it. Final question is always the same. What's the one thing we're not talking about that we really should be?
Palestine.
I mean, we did talk quite a bit about the collapse of liberalism around the globe. I guess in this instance, and I can't speak all the other conversations that you guys have had, we didn't get to talk about Israel too much. And that's something that I want to talk about, which has also exhibited historical patterns of fascism in and of itself in a vein that's not dissimilar to what we're seeing in Western liberal democracies as well.
True.
All right, we have more time. Maybe next time we can pick up some other topics.
All right.
Appreciate your time. Thanks, man.
All right, thanks for having me.
Jesus Christ. All right.